welcome to another episode of Thinking Historically About. And we're taking a little bit of a detour today in not talking about a particular historical moment, but talking about your historical moment. And so today we're going to think historically about AP courses and the AP exam. And really, there's probably no better person to have this conversation with than our guest today. Today we have Steve Heimler of the very popular YouTube channel, Heimler's History, where his YouTube channel helps prepare students for AP courses and the AP exam with a healthy mixture of seriousness and buffoonery. So, Steve, thank you so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I brought on our director of curriculum for this particular episode. And so, you know, we have Annie Jensen here, who many of you may also know as A Push Lady Boss when it comes to AP, the AP world. And so I may be the least equipped person to have this conversation, and yet here I am. Steve, can you help us understand your road to now? Why do what you do? What led you here? What's your background?
Yeah, I taught AP history courses, U.S. history, world history, European history, government, a little economics thrown in there. I taught at a very small school. I was the entire history department, so I was lucky enough to teach all of those. I did that for about a decade, and about 7 years in, I met a guy who was one of my colleagues in the math department, and he was making videos for students for the homeschool community we have here in Atlanta. And he showed me how he did it, and he showed me like his business structure and how he works it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I could do this. Since I was a kid, I loved making videos, you know, back when the video camera was like the thing you have on your shoulder, you know, and so I started doing it. My intention was I'm gonna make an online AP school kind of for homeschool students who don't have access to AP courses. And as it turned out, I started putting these videos on YouTube because I didn't have anywhere else to put them, and people started finding them, and it kind of blew my mind. Like, you know, there's 10 subscribers, and then there was 100 subscribers, and then there was 400 subscribers. I actually made a 400 subscriber special because I was not sure that I would reach 500. Like that, to me, my mind was absolutely blown at 400. And just kept gaining traction. And then March of 2020, COVID hit, and the College Board changed the exam for every AP subject. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened that I'd been a reader at the national exam for 5 years, I believe. And so I'd been making videos on the various writing that's required on the exam. So I think at that point, that was kind of what I was known for. That's where people were finding me.
Okay.
And so once the exam got changed, and it was like, it's only the whole exam, you know, down from 3 hours and 15 minutes to a 145-minute essay. I mean, you guys probably remember that. I mean, everybody was freaking out. And so lots of traffic, lots of people coming in, like, how do I do this? Help me. And so it really started blowing up at that point. And then a year later, it was like, I'm teaching full time. This is now a full-time business, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And so I stepped away from the classroom. I thought maybe temporarily, maybe this is not going to work. But so far it's been 2 years. What are we in 2025? 3 years. It's been a wild ride. It's been pretty great.
Well, I would just like to go on record that I too loved making videos as a high school student. I got 12 followers on YouTube, so we had the same passions, and they had very different trajectories.
Hey, you can't get 1 million subscribers without 12 first. So you're on your way.
I'm so grateful to my grandma, my aunt, my parents.
Yes, and their alternate email accounts.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also did a lot of recording of videos, but I was forced into it by my 3 sisters. So those did not make it on the internet. Thank goodness.
I've got many videos of really goofy things I've done, and now and then I get tempted, like, should I put these out there just to let everybody see what it was like in the beginning? But
100% yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think like a really cool like mini docu-series of the road to now would be great.
wow, okay, it's settled. You heard it here first.
So, all right, so let's talk about the road to now. So, at Thinking Nation, we try to let thinking historically guide everything that we do. So we want to see this transformation of social studies education, where both teachers and students really internalize the disciplinary nature of what we do. I want to apply that same type of thinking to this big kind of behemoth, which is the AP. Thinking historically, applying these disciplinary practices to the past, if we apply those same practices to the exam, I mean, even you talked a little bit about kind of change. Why should we think historically about the AP exams?
Well, probably for the same reason that you would want to think historically about anything, because it helps us understand and make sense of our current moment, put some solid ground under our feet. And that's not the only reason to think historically, but it's, at least in this case, maybe one of the better reasons. For myself, when it comes to my relationship with the College Board and AP classes, I was just sort of thrown in, to the deep end, and it was the job that was open, and so I'm like, yeah. I mean, I was blessed at birth with massive amounts of unearned confidence, and so for me, it's like, so there's a paycheck on the other side of that. Yeah, I'll do AP, whatever. Yeah, it's fine. I was more, for a long time, just trying to get my feet under me and like learn how to do this and how to teach and all of that. And so I never really thought much about the organization itself, where it exists in this historical moment and where it came from. But when you asked me that question, I was like, I don't know. So I went looking and found an interesting article that was published, I think, it's a journal called The History Teacher or something like that. I think that's the one. But essentially this is the history of advanced placement. And I was fascinated because, I believe the first exam was 1952. And when you look at the literature surrounding that moment where it first came out, of course, as so many things in our present moment do, have their roots in the Cold War. And so you've got this huge cultural anxiety about our, American students falling behind and losing the ideological war to the Russians. And so we need engineers, and we need these, high performing students. And there was a significant, very important survey that was done from students at Princeton, Harvard, Yale, I believe. And what they were finding over and over again is that these students were like, yeah, these classes that I have to take first 2 years before I go and specialize in my major, such a waste of time. And, this one narrative was like, I spent as much time drinking alcohol as I could. And to the degree, it almost was a game to me. Like, how could I keep my grades good and drink as much as possible? Those early courses just felt like such a waste. And so so that's where AP steps in and says, we can't have our best and brightest bored in the first and feeling like these classes are useless in the first couple of years of college. So what if we put this program together? In high school, kids can take college level courses and then ultimately get credit for them. So yeah, it ended up working. The short story is, for the next, the AP, the advanced placement program, grows pretty significantly over the next 4 decades, and especially during the 70s, had a massive uptick because we're in the middle of, economic trouble, stagflation. People are wondering, are we going to have enough money to send our kids to college? Students themselves are wondering this. And so here's this thing where I think at that point it cost, I don't know, maybe $30 to take the exam. And it's like, wow, that's a great deal for college credit. And so to me, that, like, we're in a similar moment right now where it's the cultural conversation is kind of over secondary education is being dominated by, is this really worth it? You've got skyrocketing prices. I think AP fits into that pretty snugly and has a pretty powerful argument, economic argument anyway, for their dominance in public schools.
It's wild to me. I mean, like, so two skills that like you were able to model for our listeners are causation and contextualization, and there's some continuity change over time there, but like it's true. Like, and even like if I think about the context of our maybe like the last decade in just like a real earnest push for better equity in public education. And so where the AP began as like a tool to keep Ivy League students not bored in the first 2 years, it's really transitioned into a tool that provides students who don't have the same resources as, the kids who got to go to Ivy League schools in the 1950s. And now there's whole groups of students that get to earn college credit, prior to ever attending a college. And that can be transformative for life trajectories and really exciting.
Yeah, this bleeds into the next question a little bit, but I think, Steve, you and I both started teaching AP around the same time, 2012. And when I started, there was this accessibility statement that the College Board puts out, where it says we're going to make sure that students who want to have access to AP can take it, which was very different from, I feel like, even 10 years prior, where there were a lot more of these kind of entrance exams or requirements where you had to have a certain GPA. And so that's for sure one element that I've seen change. And maybe you can speak to that accessibility a little bit more, but what other ways have you seen AP change, especially in kind of this time since maybe 2010-ish when we started teaching the courses?
I mean, I can only I can speak a little bit about AP in general, but I'll have to speak only really for my disciplines that I represent. But that's the one thing that came up in my mind as I was thinking about this question, is that in the beginning, it very much, as you said, Zach, was an elitist offering, and over time, one of the big, especially starting in the 60s and 70s, these sort of hierarchical constructions and class-based thing, these came under a lot of scrutiny, and that was one of the main criticisms that the College Board was receiving, is that you've got a lot of very rich white boys who are able to take these exams and flourish and get their they're essentially saving money on college tuition, arguably one of the groups that least needs the help. And so starting in the 80s and growing more and more until today, and when we started teaching, I think I've been to 4 of their summer training sessions, the APS, what is it?
Institutes.
AP Summer Institutes. And every one of them, like there's a 15-minute session at the beginning going over equity and inclusion and how we want students to of all stripes, of all socioeconomic backgrounds, everywhere. We want, rural, urban, everyone, we want to have access to this. And so I think that's been a huge change, that they clearly believe in the efficacy of these courses and what they're trying to do. And College Board is easy to kick around and like insult, and they get plenty of that. But like during the 2020 exam, when it was all digital and they changed the format of the exam, they made sure that students who didn't have access to the internet or students who didn't have digital devices, they made sure that they got them. And again, there was plenty of complaints but the very fact that they went above and beyond to try to do that, I mean, it's very respectable. So I think that's a huge one. As far as social studies go, my first year teaching AP US history, I was sort of at the cusp of a very big change. I think the big change was it 2014?
It was 2014.
Yeah, where there was a much bigger emphasis on the exam in their testing materials on demonstrating thinking, and I I have a love-hate relationship with standardized testing and the way we do education and in our kind of education industrial complex. But at the end of the day, if you have compulsory education laws and everybody has to be educated by law, that means you are on a kind of an industrial scale. And so there are some things that have to be sacrificed as far as, humanity and personal interaction. But I think what the College Board is doing with social studies is pretty good. It's pretty good as far as, the kinds of things that they want to happen, the way that they're assessing thinking. I would have many other ideas for how we could do it in a more humane way, but on a scale like we have, it's pretty good.
I'm curious, and since my background in teaching is almost exclusively at the middle school level, and so I'm kind of curious from both of you guys, like, what changed in your approach during these transitions, or did it not? What did that look like?
Well, for me, it was before I was a teacher, I was a minister. I went to seminary and did the whole thing, and so my, what I wanted to do, with a lot of experience in standing up in front of people and talking for a long time, like I just brought that into, I was romanced by the English language and the spoken word, and I thought, well, if I can do this in a church context, it would be the same in a classroom. And so I was very much the sage on the stage, and I worked very hard to, put together lectures that I thought would awaken the imagination of my students. And so when we went through this change, I went to the new Summer Institute, and they were really emphasizing, we don't want people at the front nearly as much. We all love doing it, it's fine, but what we want is for the students themselves to be handling the materials and the documents, and we want them to be working together and thinking through these scenarios and these interpretations and coming to conclusions and arguments and whatever. And that felt very vulnerable to me because I wasn't used to it. And even though I think I agreed in theory, because one of my secret pleasures is reading books on epistemology, and during that time I had been reading one by Esther Meek called Loving to Know, or I think this was called, and she was like something to the effect of, the mind embraces most fully the conclusions to which it comes by itself, and the conclusions it comes to on its own. And it's like, I believe that. I read that. I'm like, yes, Esther, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I don't think I trusted the process enough to really want to give myself to it, because I could trust myself to deliver this information. But when I wanted to change to have a more student-centered classroom, that was pretty scary, because I wanted to be liked. I'm just as human as anybody else, and so that felt like, how can I be a good teacher if I'm making them do all the... That's right. But it took probably a solid school year before I started to realize, oh, this whole thing belongs to them. This is not about me. This belongs to them, and this is the best way to get it done.
I think also, if your educational experience was like mine, you were taught in a classroom that was sit and get, passive learning. And I was a great memorizer. Like I just killed multiple choice tests. And then I got to college and was doing history writing tests where I don't think I took an actual multiple choice test my entire last 2 years of college. Everything was writing. And I had to get a writing tutor because that wasn't a natural way that I hadn't really been taught how to express myself and my thinking in that way. And so then the College Board switches it up on us, and now they have these different types of points in the rubric, and I'm responsible for teaching students how to do this, and yet I have never been taught how to teach that. And so it was a big shift. Not only we need to let students come to their own conclusions, but I also have to become a writing and reading teacher in a different way than I was prepared for. So that was a big shift for me. And that's something that when I talk to undergrads, it sounds like a lot of social studies prep programs are shifting to include that more, but they
Mhm.
still feel like that there's a lack there. And that's an unfortunate disconnect. I think that hopefully we'll see continue to improve as the years go on.
Yeah, and that was actually that was one of the parts, the writing piece that I was very excited about taking up because I love reading, I love writing, and what I learned just from the act of doing it is that writing is sustained thinking. And if you can learn, if I could teach my students how to write, I will teach them how to think. And if they know how to think, then they will be unstoppable. And so I mean, I had all sorts of romantic ideas about how to do it, and that those
Good.
quickly hit the rocks of reality, and I had to figure out a more systematic way. But that was one of the things that I was very excited about, is to emphasize that more.
I remember I had a historiography professor in my senior year of college or an undergrad, and we never wrote more in any other class than his class. And he said, good thinking is only a product of good, or good writing is only a good product of good thinking, but it's reciprocal. And like, like you're thinking, he kind of just made us like think that we actually weren't able to think deeply unless we did it through writing. And the more I do it, I'm like, he was right. Like, and even I remember maybe a couple years ago, the Adam Grant, I think he's at University of Pennsylvania. He's a pretty popular thinker and writer, and he said something along the lines of like, writing isn't just meant to convey your thinking, but to process your thinking. And so, like, so often we think about the audience and not ourselves in the writing process, unless you're journaling. But even when it comes to scholarship, like, this is just as much for you, if not more, than the people you're writing for. Yeah, that was a great. I appreciated that shift as when I took the AP in high school, I just had to kill that multiple choice test, as Annie put it.
Speaking of AP in high school, people are always shocked to find out that I've never taken an AP class in my life.
Me neither.
Okay, yeah. I was at best a C-level student in high school. I was not interested in AP classes,
Yeah.
so I didn't actually really start to enjoy learning until maybe last year of college and then into grad school. Um, so yeah, I don't know what it's like to sit for that exam. I've never done it.
Since I know a lot of students will listen to this, what do you think shifted between high school and college for you? Like, where was that love of learning happening? Because, like, I mean, I've heard you like, I like to read epistemology. I'm a reader and writer. I'm romantic about the English language. But I was also a C student. Like, what does that trajectory look like?
Well, okay. You'll have to stop me at some point. But my basic answer would be I started asking my own questions, and that was the problem for me in high school, is that education seemed like not only was it a bunch of answers to questions that I wasn't asking, but they were also dictating the questions themselves to me. And so it's almost like a catechism, like in the Catholic Church, or some Protestant denominations have it too, where it's like, here's all of our doctrines, here's the question, and then here's the answer. Now there's some ways in which that's very good, and it's
Yeah.
helpful to like internalize the dogmas and all that sort of thing. So I'm not criticizing it at all. But when it came to why I was not interested in school, is because it felt very catechetical. I had really deep questions that I wanted to ask, and nobody was allowing me to ask them. And later in my teaching career, when I became more comfortable, because in the first couple of years, you're just like, here's these groups of teenagers judging me at, everything I do, and I want to, so nervous all the time. But like, once I finally kind of settled into it and was more comfortable, I would do that. I would just, once a month, we would have a whole class was just question and answer. Like, what questions do you have? And I'll do my best to answer them. And if I can't, then somebody else will. And like, let's just talk. Let's
Yeah.
have it. And to me, that is just so important, because kids can just feel like we think of them as brains on sticks, and instead of fully formed human beings with that whose lives are larger than what is going on in this classroom right now. Like, obviously I'm here. I've devoted my life to this subject and to teaching it to you. So I think this is really important, but But I found that unless I stop and take time to justify why I think it's important and why you're here, it's like, yeah, I know you're here because you're legally required to be here. But there's some gold here if you'll allow it to dazzle you. One of the things Esther Meek said in that book is that there's, basically two ways to fall in love with something. One is to see it for yourself and all of its component parts and just it's marvelous and I'm awed by it and I fall in love with it. The other is to see someone else loving it. And so I wanted to help my students see what it looked like for a fully grown man to be in love with something and for them to hopefully catch that as well.
Yeah.
Do you feel like as we talked about with the AP exams, having to have this end exam, this standardized exam, do you feel like the changes that, were started in 2014 and then there was another big change to the rubrics just last year, do you think that allows the experience to account for more of that student-led inquiry and, better historical thinking?
As within the structure, yes, but I have so many problems with the structure itself. Like, I'm sitting here before we got on starting to work on videos to prepare kids for the exams, and so I download the last year's DBQs, and I'm reading through the documents. I'm trying to make a video on, because so many students talk to me about how they struggle to interpret the documents. And so I download it and I start reading through the documents, and I'm realizing I'm taking so much time to try to understand this, and I'm trying to like internalize and understand what it means. And I've got way more experience and background than these kids do. And some of them I have to really sit with for a few minutes and like, okay, now I understand where they're coming from, what this is about. But like this, this sort of artificial pressure cooker that we have where it's like, you really can only spend like a minute on this document. And it's like, this is, so in a sense, it's like, yes, this is what historians do. And that's great that we look at primary documents, secondary, we put all this together, make arguments, support it with evidence. That is what we do. But I don't know of another scenario in which you have to do it in that amount of time. It's like, so, I think the idea is very good, and this is just the way it is. And I don't think we're going to see it change at all, but I wish there was a more natural way to be like, I mean, even historians, even working historians have deadlines. It's not like, we just sit around and, one day we'll, I'm going to do 30 years of research on this and then publish it. There's always less time to do the research and do the writing than we would want. But I wish there was a more natural way to simulate that experience rather than like it's you got 45 minutes to write this essay. Again, with the number of people doing it, with the way our system works, I don't know of another way. Zach said that you're more of a realist. He's more of the romantic. I'm more like an idea guy. I don't know how to work these things out. So on the ground. So if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
Sure. Let me just give you my thesis on.
Yes. Let us reform the whole thing top to bottom.
No, I think that you're exactly right, is that we're trying to measure something that is nuanced and complex, and we're assigning point values to thinking. And that's important to have an objective view of a student, and so that the graders are giving an equal score. However, then that also makes it easier to teach to the test and to try to, as some people say, beat the AP, right? Like, we're going to just teach you how to get the most. I mean, I've done this, right? Here's the 4 points that you need to get right away, and here's how to front load them, right? Because we want our students to be successful in this really difficult thing. And so in a way, that's not really measuring their ability to think historically.
Yeah.
It's measuring their ability to meet the requirements on a rubric. Now, I think the requirements on the rubric are better than they were pre-2014. So I'm happy with those changes. But in reality, when we think about specifically AP US history, Students aren't taking a course in college that's $14.91 to the present.
Right.
And so they aren't having to cram in that amount of knowledge in one exam. And so there's just a lot of complex factors that are making this a difficult thing, to give students the experience of a historian and true historical thinking when they are really trying to ultimately get that college credit.
Yeah, Annie and I have talked about this a lot in curriculum design. Like, inquiry is not efficient. Like, that's just what it is.
No, and when efficiency is the highest value, you're losing an awful lot of genuine human characteristics of what could be done. But again,
That's the structure. Yeah. Okay, so given the system, why, like, and even with our frustrations with it, why does the AP matter for students?
well, to me, going back to there's several reasons. Going back to the economic reason, I think it's a huge benefit for students whose families struggle to pay for college.
Yeah.
The exam is what, $90 now?
Mm-hmm.
Several, maybe 100. I can't remember what it is currently, but and I know there are several state governments who pay for it.
Yeah.
I know Texas, Florida. I'm sure there are others, and so that's great. It's something that can help students, on the high side, maybe even cut college costs in half if they take enough and earn enough credit. But now having a high school student of my own in my own household, who's taking currently AP World History, which poor kid, his teacher
I would not want to live
loves
with you.
my stuff, and so he's trying to work it out.
Does he get to like watch your videos in class? Yeah, of course.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this just a small tangent here. This teacher allows students who get fives to decorate ceiling tiles, and so his first day in class, he walks in, he sits down and looks up, and that's me painted on the ceiling, and it says "Our God," literally right above my son. I know, and I was just like, and he texted it to me. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to tell you. It just, you're gonna have to endure it. You are having an AP experience that nobody else is gonna have, but whatever. But anyway, now having sort of experiencing it from the inside, I'm realizing just how anxious these kids are about college and getting all the APs, and how much it helps to succeed in these classes for the sake of getting into a particular school, especially the more competitive schools. So I think the bar for entry is now almost requiring these AP courses. And I mean, your question was, why is it important? I think it's important in all of those ways. I think it's important for the way that it helps students think, and all the ways that we probably all agree on. But I actually think what I tell my son and what I tell kids who are, anxious, I get to talk to a lot of people about this, is like, it's not as important as you think. It's if there's a school you want to go to and they require all these APs, okay, then that's something you're gonna have to do. Fine, but I'm more interested that you're happy and that you're a full human being with friends and activities. And my son is into theater, and he's in the drama club, and they're there 4 nights a week, and so, and he's stressed about his AP class, and I'm like, dude, I know you're a Heimler, but I don't care if you get a C in that class, because you've got these friends over here and they love you and this community. And that is actually more important to me than whether you can get into University of Georgia or whatever. It's like, I mean, I was the first person to go to college in my family. And so I didn't know anything about college. I graduated in 1998. In July of that summer, my dad comes down to my room and he's like, "Are you going to go to college?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." And, I mean, like, now it's like my son, who is a sophomore, is like, he's been thinking about it since last year. I'm like, I don't understand any of that. So to me, I want I just want students to be happy. I don't want them to stress over this, because you can have a really great life whether you take no APs, some APs, a lot of APs. It's just, can you be happy while balancing what you need to do what you want?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I always told my students, because I worked in a low income school near Minneapolis, and I had students who came in with a third grade reading level, and so they're trying to take an AP, and we would just sit down and have honest conversations about what are your goals. And for them, it was that I want to challenge myself, and I want to figure out, I want to make the mistakes here in high school while I have you to support me, because I want to go to college. I want to do these things. And so I think that, like you're saying, there are students where you have to take the certain number of APs or the certain courses to be seen as a good candidate. And then there's other students who are able to just invest in the experience and challenge themselves in a more supportive environment, because it is a much bigger challenge than your regular course that's happening. And so I think that that's one of the biggest opportunities for students, is to find out, here's my best way to study, and I realized that because this other method didn't work. And so that's one of the biggest methods that are positives I see coming out, that's available for all students.
Yeah, and probably one of the other things to add to the, why is it important bucket, is for the students who want that extra challenge for whatever reason. Maybe it's totally utilitarian for them. It's just like, well, I have to do this so I can get into that other course and so I can get into that college or whatever. But whatever it is, all the students who show up in that class, they do know that they're going to work. And there's a certain collegiality, at least in the classes that I taught. I can only speak for myself, where it's like, we're here to work, and you go into it knowing this is hard. It's going to be hard, and there's a sense of sort of everybody rising to the occasion. Now, which isn't to say anything about negative about other courses that are not AP. There are magnificent teachers who take those courses, and like you, Zach, in the middle school age. There's a way to do it, but for whatever reason, it's like when you've got the AP designation, there's just a mental expectation where it's like, okay, we're going in here, we're going to work, and so that's sort of the environment that you come into.
So, I mean, honestly, I almost want to just end there, because I think just like the heart for students is at the center of this all, and that's so good to think through. But hopefully this last question kind of extends that a little bit. You engage with hundreds of thousands of students, or they engage with your work. To some of them, you're their god. What impact for students do you hope for?
Despite all my protestations about the system that we have and all of its shortcomings, I am a realist in the sense that I know that there can't be any like large scale change, at least according to the way I'm thinking, because that would require a completely different societal structure, governmental, whatever.
We'll figure it out, Steve.
Right. So knowing that, I am working in the system, and what I want the students to know is that I love them, and that I'm for them, and that if nobody else is cheering you on, there's at least one bald bearded man down in Atlanta who is. And so to me, the most I was recently reading a memoir by a novelist called Frederick Buechner, and he says that he used to be a teacher at Exeter, and he was reflecting on his own teachers and the greatest teachers that he had, and he said the best teachers that I ever had gave me not merely their subject matter, but they gave me themselves. And so I want, the impact I want to have is that when a student is struggling and doesn't understand how to read a document, or doesn't understand the French and Indian War or whatever it is, and they go to YouTube to figure it out and they find me, I want them to know that I really care about them, and that I'm giving them myself. I'm not, in the beginning I was copying John Green or, whoever was, the big video makers at that point. But over time, I found my own voice. I give what only I have to give. And I hope that what they understand is that I'm giving you myself, and that's the best gift I can give you. And I see that to some degree when I meet students out in public. Is that they do say something about how I help them with their grade or whatever, but on a few occasions it's just like it really feels like you care about me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's all I want. It's just a small little piece of humanity in this huge industrial machine that we have. I hope that that's the impact that I have.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed kind of engaging with maybe a more contemplative Heimler's history in this conversation, and just like thinking about what the AP means and what it holds. Thank you so much for joining us and helping us think historically about the AP exams, about the AP courses in history. And for all your students, I don't need to tell you guys, but there'll be a bunch more videos coming out before the AP exam on Heimler's history. So yeah, get some help.
Thank you. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. I appreciate it.